Jonah to Nineveh. A long time ago, 8th century BC, in the northern kingdom, this is where the Israelites lived at this time, and there was terrible problems. There was conflicts and riots and uprisings, and people were scared and full of anxiety. It was a terrible time. The Israelites, they were full of sin, deep in sin, and this kindled God's wrath. And God sent prophets to go and talk to them and to warn them that they needed to repent. And if they refused, that God would exile them into another country and they would become slaves. One of the prophets he sent, his name was Amos. He sent him and told them to repent. And a few people did listen, and they did. And they understood that God was going to exile them to another country, into Assyria. The Assyrians, the people of that country, they were pagans. They worshipped idols. The community there, Nineveh, that's where Jonah went and preached after he was swallowed by the great fish. In this country was the greatest empire of the Near East at that time. Assyria, they detested the Israelites. God poured down his judgment against the Israelites. Why? Because they refused to repent. So what God did is he used the Assyrians to go to war and conquer the Israelites. The Lord also poured out his judgment on Assyria. Now, why did he do that? Well, it's because they were arrogant. They thought they were so great and important. Even though God had used them to discipline his people, the Israelites. Before God judged Assyria, he had promised that he would judge them. They had done terrible things to the Israelites, and he allowed it. But afterwards, the Lord showed his love and his mercy to them. He sent Jonah to go and preach to them. At that time, there was a terrible famine going on. There were riots. There was even an earthquake. Terrible things. And this caused the Assyrians to be ready. They were serious. They were ready to listen to Jonah preach. There are people today who say, Jonah was swallowed by a great fish. That's not possible. That's a ridiculous story. But we know that God does the impossible. God does the supernatural. God does the miraculous. God teaches us all things are possible. Jonah was a prophet. He was called by God, and he was not obeying God. God told him to go preach. He didn't. Later, he learned the hard way. God will have mercy on whom he chooses, and that's a lesson that we learn. Now, how do we apply this to our life today, our Christian life? A long time ago, God promised Abraham that the people born to him would bless the nations with the gospel. The people of the Old Covenant a long time ago, they wanted to keep God's blessings for themselves and not share the light of the world with the other nation. It's the same thing today. People tend to hide their light under a bushel. And, not share this good news, this light with people who don't believe. We need to pray for others. We need to support missionaries who spread the gospel and do whatever is needed to reach the nations with the gospel. We should do that. The next few devotions are going to be about the book of Jonah. The story of the fish, the story of Jonah being willing to preach to the people of Nineveh. Really, it's an interesting story. Maybe you and I think that Jonah, made mistakes. Well, we're going to learn that we're the same. We make mistakes too. I want to encourage you to watch these devotions. It's very interesting about Jonah and his life. Coram Deo.